Hey guys, it's towniesimbuilds here, and welcome back to another episode of the Sims 4 Real Lore. In this series, I explore different mysteries and historical places with a kind of odd, eerie, or sometimes supernatural air about it. So for today's episode, we are looking at the Ryokufuso, located in Ninohe City in the Iwate Prefecture in Japan. Now, as a quick note, today's tale will be of a more supernatural, paranormal vibe, so hopefully please keep that in mind. This will be slightly spooky, but not too spooky. And as an additional note, I will be trying to pronounce a lot of different Japanese names, and I'm not versed in Japanese, but hopefully you guys can bear with me. But anyways, our topic is, of course, the Ryokufuso, and this is a Japanese inn that is deemed to be haunted by a 600-year-old spirit. So starting things off, I do want to give a little bit of background regarding the inn itself. Now, this inn is also known as a ryokan, which is a traditional style of Japanese inn. Now, this inn is very common throughout Japan, and typically these are located near hot springs or hot spring resorts. But not to be confused with onsens, not all ryokans are onsens, that just happens to be a correlation. Now, these inns are very popular among the Japanese residents and with tourists outside of the country. Like I said, these are very traditional inns featuring tatami flooring, futon beds, authentic cuisine, and a lot of other similar offerings, sometimes even offering the onsen bathhouse aspect as well. They do vary a lot more than traditional Western inns in terms of some of them are very small, like a bed and breakfast, and others are quite large, like a chain hotel. Now, with that said, there also comes varyings in how luxurious the inn is. Some are very small and humble, and others are made for very wealthy, ostentatious guests. So that is just a little bit of background on the ryokans of Japan. Now, interestingly for our tale today, the Ryokufuso was not originally intended to be an inn. And to explore its origins, we do need to go further back in time to around the Middle Ages of Japan. Our story begins with a man by the name of Fujiwara no Fujifusa, who lived roughly between 1295 AD and 1380 AD. Fujiwara was, from my research, it was a little difficult trying to find his profession, but from what I saw, he worked as a courtier for the shogun leader. The courtier is more or less a political advisor for the imperial or ruling court, and it does seem that he was some kind of record keeper or perhaps even worked in sustaining literature, given that he was involved with editing the 36 Poetic Immortals, which is actually an artifact preserved today. So, fairly interesting. Again, unfortunately, not a lot of information was there about him, but he did in fact serve under the Kamakura shogunate. So in this period of Japan, there are different clans or factions that are pretty much seizing control through military power and taking reign in that sense. And this did alternate between the imperial lineages or imperial rules, which again leads me to my next point. At some point, unfortunately, the clan or ruling party that Fujiwara was a part of does in fact fall. Originally, he was located in what would be modern-day Kyoto, but he would then be forced to move out and relocate to the modern-day Ninohe, where the Iwate Prefecture is. Now, for reference, I did include a map, and this area is located much farther north of modern-day Tokyo and does border the Pacific on the east coast. So now you're probably wondering, what does this man have to do with the modern-day ryokan known as the Ryokufuso? So again, this goes back to a little bit of his family life. A lot of it does remain a bit of a mystery, but it is known that he did in fact have a wife and he had at least 2 sons. There was a possibility that he had a daughter, but again, those records are not known. Now, our star of the story today is actually his eldest son by the name of Kamemaro. Now, unfortunately, the young Kamemaro falls ill at age 6, again, unfortunately, of unknown illness. But while he is ill, he resides in a room that is known as the Enju no Ma. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a clear translation of what this means, but this was an inner room that was included in the family's estate. Unfortunately, the young boy does pass away around the year 1365. But interestingly, he reportedly vowed to his family to protect them even beyond the grave, that he would look after his parents, his siblings, and the whole household. Unfortunately, some time would pass, and his father would die about 15 years later. And again, we don't really have any knowledge or whereabouts of what occurs with his mother or his siblings. Fortunately for us, however, the young Kamemaro does in fact live on, but in a very interesting otherworldly form no less. And that leads me to the lore of yokai. Now, the word yokai has a very interesting origin. By definition, it does derive from the Japanese kanji, deriving from words such as attractive calamity, apparition, mystery, and wonder. Now, by the modern definition, yokai does collectively refer to a pretty large, diverse range of different spirits and supernatural entities. These do vary quite a bit in how they appear. Some of them are more human-like or humanoid, some of them are creatures, some of them are even deities themselves. And if you guys are familiar with the work of Hayao Miyazaki, especially with films like Spirited Away, there are in fact a lot of yokai who are depicted in that film. Now, in terms of a word in English or in Western culture, unfortunately, we don't really have anything to describe it quite well. And there also is a large misconception that yokai are referring to demons, and that is absolutely not the case. These spiritual or supernatural entities vary quite a bit. A lot of them are quite good, they are playful and fun, but there are also some that are more darker and malevolent, so it pretty much is a wide range or spectrum. Now, the lore and origin of the yokai actually dates back several centuries, and they originate from a lot of the older tribes and villages of Japan, influenced by different belief systems, mainly a mixture of Buddhism and Shintoism. Now, the yokai were not really seen in a lot of art. It was only until the 17th and 19th centuries where depictions of yokai in Japanese art became more common, mostly thanks to the printing press. It made creating illustrations much more accessible, and you would see it in a lot of wall art and literature as well. Now, you're probably wondering what the yokai has to do with our young Kamemaro. And interestingly enough, the young Kamemaro does in fact become a yokai himself. The yokai he becomes is known as a Zashiki Warashi. And the Zashiki Warashi is quite an interesting yokai indeed. The Zashiki is traditionally a benevolent spirit, and sometimes is referred to as a minor deity or even a fairy type of spirit, if you will. Now, in terms of the etymology, I guess you would say, if we look at the word Zashiki, it essentially is a traditional Japanese sitting room. This room is usually accompanied by tatami mats and is used as a room to receive guests, similar to a parlor, but it can also be used as a guest room as well. The term Hawashi refers to child in Japanese, therefore, if translated, Zashiki Warashi translates to guest room child or parlor child. Now, the appearance of this being, again, is quite interesting. Normally, this spirit takes the form of a young child, usually around ages 5 through 8. However, some report them looking quite older, as old as 15, so you have kind of like a teenage spirit walking around, if you will. Now, there are occurrences where the Zashikis kind of come in pairs. There may be a boy and girl, 2 boys or 2 girls, but again, this is kind of a rare occurrence. Now, in terms of appearance, they normally appear in very traditional Japanese clothing. So for boys, presumably, they might be wearing a yukata, which are traditional Japanese robes for males, but they can also appear in a miniature samurai or warrior outfit, if that makes sense. For girls, they usually appear in some derivative of the kimono. Now, in terms of complexion, they usually are quite pale, but there are reports that they have red in their face, perhaps rosy cheeks or blush, and often with short black hair, or if they are a female version of the spirit, they have their hair tied back. Throughout the centuries, there have been a lot of lore regarding the Zashiki Warashis themselves. Now, reportedly, throughout many years, they have been very hard to capture on film, they've been hard to see in full apparition, and interestingly enough, they can only be seen by children or the adults living within the estate where the Zashiki is haunting, supposedly. Now, based on my research, it was unknown if Kamemaro's family actually saw him as this type of spirit. Unfortunately, we don't really have any information regarding that. But speaking to their family's estate, there is a very interesting connection between the Iwate Prefecture, where Kamemaro's family lived, and the lore of the Zashiki Warashi. Now, like I said, this area is located farther north in Japan, and a lot of the lore actually comes from an older city by the name of Tono. It is actually very well known for a lot of the folklore traditions that have been passed down through many generations throughout the years. Now, particularly, there are two yokai that this area is very well noted for, one of them, of course, being the Zashiki Warashi, and the other being the Kappa, which is a more reptilian yokai, usually seen along lakes, rivers, and other bodies of water. So you're probably wondering, what can the Zashiki Warashi do? And man, they are lots of fun. They are very playful and mischievous. It is said that a lot of them leave footprints throughout the house, either running through ashes, washing powder, maybe even sand, or a similar substance. A lot of these spirits can also create sounds. Perhaps they may be playing with toys. You might hear the sounds of spinning tops or crinkling paper. You may also hear sounds of laughter, the sound of drums, even singing. And they also are quite mischievous when the living are sleeping. Supposedly they can shift pillows in your sleep, or may even try to lay on your tummy. So yeah, I guess by Western standards that may be a little creepy or unsettling, but I think there definitely is a very innocent and playful nature towards that. Now, apart from a lot of these more playful antics, these spirits are actually quite friendly and very good Samaritans themselves. It is known that these Zashiki spirits do also accompany elderly people. They will also accompany families where the parents were unable to bear children, and at some times would even befriend local children as well, passing on a lot of the folklore shared within that region. Now, on that note, these spirits are actually regarded as pinnacles of good fortune. These beings are known to bring prosperity to the household or wherever the establishment is that the ghosts are residing in. And just like the young deceased Kamemaro himself, these ghosts do in fact usually haunt the central parlor room of the home. So it was definitely an interesting parallel when I was doing my research to see where that transition happened and why Kamemaro became one of these entities. Now, going off of that, there is also a risk of misfortune. So if you either mistreat the spirit, or if you become neglectful of him or her and the spirit decides to leave, it is said that you can suffer from some different forms of bad luck. Now, from the old city of Tono, which still exists today to my knowledge, there are some very interesting tales where this misfortune did in fact ensue. Now, from the tales of Tono, there is a story of one particular family who had such terrible misfortune. Now, for unknown reason, their Zashiki spirit did in fact leave their household, and not long after, the family was hit by a foodborne illness, perhaps suffering some form of food poisoning. And without much due time at all, the family did in fact pass on. Alternatively, there is another story of a very wealthy family who also did have a Zashiki Warashi living in their household. Now, I don't really know how this happened, but the family did have a son, and I assume that he was either using a toy or got spooked, but the son did possess a bow and arrow and tried to strike the Zashiki when he did encounter him. Like I said, I assume that the child was scared and was trying to protect the family, or perhaps trying to play with the spirit, but as a result, the Zashiki did leave the household. And fortunately for this family, I do believe that they were able to survive. They weren't suffering from any ailments, but they did in fact suffer heavy losses with their financial and money resources. Now, if you do want to appease the Zashiki Warashi and escape a lot of the bad fortune experienced by these families, normally a lot of families do in fact offer the spirit treats. They may offer little candies, little toys, like I mentioned earlier, and in general are just very friendly, amicable, and welcoming to the spirit. Normally, the parlor room or guest room heavily associated with the Zashiki Warashi, this should also be very heavily maintained, cleaned, and most likely well furnished as well, again to further appease the spirit and continue bringing good luck and good fortune to the household. Now, fast forwarding 600 years, there is in fact a very strong connection between Kamemaro and the Ryokufuso Inn as it is known today. Now, there isn't a lot of information about what happened to Kamemaro's family's estate, but by the year 1955, the estate, or at least the land where the estate was formerly upon, this area became a ryokan, a Japanese inn. And for many years, there would be reported sightings of a small boy dressed in traditional clothes with dark hair and a pale face. And with a lot of the lore and history of the village, many people confirm that this was the Zashiki Warashi form of the young deceased Kamemaro. And for the inn, this was awesome. It actually got a lot of attention. It sparked a lot of interest in the inn itself. And reportedly, the room where his main altar is located, it is filled with toys, filled with different types of offerings from many different guests, including stuffed animals filled to the wall. This room was very heavily reserved. In fact, it was so reserved that you could not even stay in this room for a good 2 to 3 years. So quite a blessing indeed by the young Kamemaro. Now, apart from bringing such good fortune to this ryokan, Kamemaro has also graced the guests as well. A lot of them who have experienced his presence or have pretty much gotten in his good graces have further experienced good health, wealth, fortune, positivity, and luck. And as an effort to reciprocate that, they have given him toys and other belongings to his altar as well. Now, unfortunately, our tale does take a sad turn, given that in 2009 there was quite a large fire that started from the boiler room. Unfortunately, this fire engulfed the whole estate, and although everyone was able to make it out safely, the whole building was reduced to rubble. Now, there is in fact a Shinto shrine that is located in the backyard of the estate, and fortunately this did survive. It is believed that the shrines were dedicated to Kamemaro himself, so these do in fact still stand to this day. About 7 years later, the Ryokufuso does open once more in the year 2016, and it does receive quite a makeover. It is definitely a lot more modern now. And unfortunately, to the dismay of the property owners, there hasn't been the presence of Kamemaro. It is probably believed that because of the fire, he became lost and is now spotted throughout the village itself. But I do believe that the altar is still there, and there are still efforts to bring him back to his home where he originally grew up, which of course now is the inn itself. Alright guys, and that is a wrap on the tale of the haunted Ryokufuso, inhabited by our one and only Kamemaro, the Zashiki Warashi that unfortunately still needs to find his way back home. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the lore and the speed build portion of this. This build is a take on the modern reconstructed version of the inn itself. So you will see a lot of pictures where you'll see older versions of the hotel, along with a lot more contemporary versions with a lot of the rooms recreated in this build. As always, this will be on the Sims 4 gallery. This is a limited pack build that you guys can download and use. And I will end today's tale with some nice cinematics and the lot specs for you guys as well. Like always, this has been towniesimbuilds signing off. Thank you so much for watching, guys.